Welcome back. You're still watching Daybreak on this 4th day of November 2025. We had started the conversation on the Kenya shilling versus the dollar. Appears to have really stabilized for the past more than 1 year. We have grown the forex reserves to 5.3 months. Before President Ruto came to the office, we used to do just above 3 months. We require to be at least 4 months. So we are beyond that lower ceiling, if that is English, to 5.3. And in specific terms, it's more than 12 billion US dollars, which can cover us for the 5.3 months. But Steve, all these figures versus the reality, what are your thoughts around this?
First and foremost, it's very unfortunate for the chairman of the president's economic team to allude to the fact that them as economists actually practicing witchcraft. And it can go this way, or it can go that way, because it actually alludes to what the IMF is saying, that the relationship between the Kenya shilling and the dollar is actually being managed and being manipulated. And if you look at what issues are actually being done, we've seen that our forex reserves have been grown to 5.5 months, which is 12 billion. We've seen increased foreign remittances. This is one of the things that the president actually been very keen on, has been saying that I'm actually sending people away so that they can be able to bring in money. So when you look at the core macro aspects of our economy, manufacturing, agriculture, tourism, they're no longer the aspects that are being used to monitor the economy, but they're looking at inflation, they're looking at how much we're getting in terms of foreign remittances, and the element of contained inflation. If you look at how inflation is, and you look at how much ordinary Kenyans have in terms of being able to spend the money, it tells you that there's a lot of cooking in terms of the numbers that's being done. I know there's very strict monitoring by central bank in terms of how the Kenya shilling is doing, specifically with the dollar, and it tells you when you look at the interbank trade, for example, when you look at the PMI index, when you look at inflation. For me, I believe that the numbers are being managed. I believe that the core aspect of the economy is deliberately being ignored so that we do not ask the relevant question. And if you ask the ordinary teacher, for example, or the ordinary civil servant, or the ordinary police, they will tell you they're not able to afford 3 meals per day, and they can only afford 1 single meal in a day. And this is the economic reality, that the numbers we speak about in terms of inflation and in terms of how much we have in terms of forex reserves, there's a very, very, very big problem. And it leads to the single one question: if the president's chief economist can say we are practicing witchcraft, and then the IMF and World Bank are saying that you guys are manipulating the shilling versus the dollar, what exactly is really happening? And then allow me to get into investments. When you look at Kenyans putting money in market funds, for example, or special funds, there's a very, very big problem, because when you factor in inflation and you factor in charges and everything, you realize that our inflation numbers are very high. They're no longer at 5.2, the way the president keeps saying. And I remember during the burial of the former prime minister in Kisumu, the president praised the current CS for Treasury, saying that since the broad-based government came into power, this gentleman has been able to stabilize the shilling. But that's not true. 8 months prior to BBG being formed, the dollar was performing the way it's been. It's been consistent. So for me, I believe all of us sitting here, we do not have the exact numbers, or do not have the official correct numbers to be able to really understand how the economy is doing, to be able to understand how the reality is in terms of the economy, because the numbers are being given, I honestly believe, without any shred of doubt, they're incorrect. And they're being falsified to actually be able to push a particular narrative that the president has been very keen on. The inflation numbers are doing very well, the dollar is very stable. These are the two issues. When you listen to the deputy president, when you listen to the CS, these are the two things they keep talking about. You know, when he says, oh, the opposition have nothing to offer, I can assure you the shilling has been very stable, the inflation rates are very low. So you keep asking yourself, why these particular two numbers when there are other economic indicators that you can be able to look at? Look at how much our ceiling foreign debt. We keep borrowing every single day. We have no money for schools, we have no money for medical, but we have money to bribe voters. So it's a whole...
What do you mean bribe?
Well, the president is meeting people regionally, and you are told to attend and you'll be given 5,000. Where is this 5,000 coming from? Yeah, for attending.
It's facilitation fee?
I come from Webuye. The president was in Kakamega. I don't need 5,000 to attend a meeting in Kakamega. I only need 200 shillings. So am I being given 5,000 shillings? And when you look at how the shilling versus the dollar is doing, and you look at how much money we are borrowing every single day,
yeah,
there's no accountability. Explain to me why we have no money for healthcare, no money for education, no money for capitation, but we have money to fund the president's campaign trail across the country.
Tell me, who knows here, before I get to you, who knows, because the CBK bulletin reports two figures. Three. There's the inflation rate at 4.6% as of October 30th. Then there's core inflation at 2.7%, and then there's non-core inflation at 9.9%. And the non-core is on the rise. What is core and what is non-core?
I think first and foremost, we were just discussing here how come key numbers are not being released anymore. If you look at the unemployment rate, our economic report looks at the global rate and not our local rate. If you look at core inflation, different economic methods arrive at different numbers. If you look at what are the parameters you're using to arrive at particular numbers, we look at core, we'll be looking at the food prices, food serve prices, we're looking at the fuel aspect, we'll be looking at the forex reserves. So this will actually be able to give you the core number. But the reason why central bank is actually, we have three different numbers, is just basically to confuse the ordinary Kenyan, because the correct value of inflation is actually at 11.1. If you're to look at key aspects, if I'm to look at the top 5 foodstuffs, for example, if you add fuel to it, if you add unemployment rate, if you add forex reserves, if you add how much you're getting back in terms of investment in your savings account, fixed deposit, or money market fund, our inflation is very high. But we're looking at core, which is around 2.3, and what the president keeps talking about, which is at 5.2. It tells you there's a very big problem in terms of how the numbers are being discussed. And it becomes a mockery of discussing economic issues when we do not have the correct numbers to discuss. And when you have a body like Kenya Bureau of Statistics not discussing key numbers and telling you how they've arrived at these key numbers, it becomes a really big problem.
I think if you look at the inflation, just to give some perspective, Kenya National Bureau of Statistics has a document of 330 commodities that gets into what we call the consumer price index basket. So out of this, we find that 82% of that is what we call the core commodities. And then you have 18%, which is now the non-core, the volatile aspects, what you call about the fuel. We also have some of the fuel and some of the food. And also within the food, you find that some are core food commodities and others are non-core commodities. So to the question, you find that core typically, and this is something that happens across major economies or any other economy, they sort of classify the volatile, which is now the non-core, and now this the core, which tends to be less volatile. So to the volatile, that's where the 9% that you've alluded to, the non-core, which is still stable. And then if you sort of look at where it is, that's where the headline comes at 4.6%. So these numbers are there. Probably what...
Sorry, so you've described what core is, what non-core is. So headline is?
Headline is now the aggregate, all the...
For everything,
yeah. Yeah, that's the 4.6%. Core is 2.7%, if I had your numbers correct. And now the non-core, which is the volatile, tends to be a bit elevated at 9.9% thereabout here. Because those are the volatile, So typically what we need to get from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics is to be able to see even the different segments, disaggregating it further. Because what Kenya National Bureau of Statistics normally does is that the full inflation report, there are normally like 13 different categories, but we need to look at even a step further lower. This is something that even other economists, they do. There's some elaborate data on all the 330 commodities. So probably that should be there so that you can say, okay, for this month, probably it's the food component went much up this much, or the fuel. And to your question, if you look at the basket of inflation, you find that it's an average. of the different commodities. The highest in that basket is mobile money, mobile airtime at 5%. Ordinarily, probably not everyone can be able to relate to this. Say for every 100 shillings you have, 5 shillings is going to mobile money. That may not be the case, and that's the highest. It's even higher than rent, which may not be the case. So you find that for inflation, and now trying to look at how it's different from the reality, because if I live in Kibera, my pain point is now on food. Probably up to 70% of my expenditure is on food. But when you look at the inflation for the average, you find that food is around 32%. So that's probably where the disconnect is, and probably where Steve is alluding to the fact that probably inflation should be around 11%. But you see, for the inflation that we have is an average for every Kenyan, both urban and rural. So that is where the 4.6 is coming from, but it's just for the policymakers. But if you start to take a deep dive into different aspects of how each and every household is consuming, that's where the differences comes by. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Ikua, so then, what is the business sector feeling with all the statistics, the conversations, stability of the Kenyan currency? What is the business sector saying?
Well, you know, when I listen to the conversation that we are having today, Sam, the first question that gets into my head is whether the common business person that is currently listening to us while they are selling their mandazis or they are operating their car wash business are understanding what exactly we are talking about. Because when you talk about the stability of a dollar, for example, I know for sure the dollar, in a very simplistic manner of explanation in regards to how it affects our day-to-day life, is that Kenya is an importer of very many goods that we are buying off the street and off the shelves. We have imported them. And if we have any manufacturing happening in the country that is left, obviously the raw materials have been imported. So the simplest way of explaining how the exchange of the dollar to the shilling is happening is on cost of those particular goods on the shelves. Because it's a direct translation. If you import, you're going to import in dollars and you have to convert your Kenya shillings into a dollar. So that is exactly what we are talking about. And when Steve talks about inflation, and when we talk about inflation, the simplest way of explanation of what is happening is how much 1,000 shillings can afford to you when you go into the supermarket. So if you carry 1,000 shillings and you're entering a supermarket to buy some stuff for your family, for example, a 2 kg sugar is costing at 340. But if you pick a 2 kg cooking oils, what we call sunflower cooking oil, it's costing at 869 at the supermarket. With 1,000 shillings, you cannot be able to buy those two items. I mean, if you listen to the government talking, and you can see how happy and excited those who are in charge of our economy are, they have been telling us about 100 shillings of, for example, unga, what we talk about unga ugari. But if you go to the supermarket today, if somebody can be able to dash into that very mini market near their estate, it's 175 shillings. 180 shillings if you're going for those high-end ones. So basically, what are we saying? A bread, 800 grams, is 124 shillings. So if you look at 5 years ago, in the construction industry, for example, a casual worker was earning 500 shillings. So a dude walking down from Kibera, and he's coming to Kilimani here for a job of a construction worker, he's earning 500 shillings per day. 600 shillings if you're good, if you're lucky to be paid better. How much can that 500 shillings afford to buy? How much can it be? How much it is worth?
So you said that was 10 years ago?
5 years ago. 5 years ago it was 500. Now it's 500. But the price of the commodities have not stagnated at that level. I mean, we've been seeing increase of price of commodities every day. If you look at business, I mean, a business person may encounter changes and variation of prices in terms of goods. But definitely they are going to transfer that into the consumer. So once you receive, you know, your raw materials at a particular cost, for example, and I know for sure the economists will tell us about when we talk about something being zero rated, for example. It's an increment of a net price. Because when you talk about zero rated, you do not benefit from what we call an input tax of VAT. You can no longer claim that particular VAT, which means if you're buying raw materials that you cannot claim.
No, zero rated you can. Exemption
No,
is
exemption. I'm talking about exempted. You
Yes.
know, when they came and changed a lot of goods from zero rated to exempt,
Yes.
it ended up making goods expensive. But to an expert who would understand how that happened. But to a common Mwananchi may not understand how it is that happened. But to the song of the government people who are reporting to us how the economy is doing, they would actually thought that they are telling you something good. But the eventual result of what it is that you're experiencing means the commodity is high. What I was trying to allude to, to directors, to Sam, is that whenever a commodity, whenever a policy is done, and a price change happens within the raw material or manufacturing or importation level, it will definitely reflect into the end user. And the end user is now the economy. Because the business person has to make a margin. They still have to, mark it up, at whatever cost they're producing it. No matter how little they can sacrifice their margins, they will still have to make a profit by the end of the day. Okay. And that is where the issue is. That is why you find that now, when the experts are telling us about the inflation, the best way to explain it is how much 1,000 shillings can afford. If 5 years ago you've been paid 500 shillings, that it could have given you this much, and today you're still being paid the same amount of money, and you're getting little, that means you're suffering. That is the direct translation. If people have to explain what is happening on the ground, as commonly called Mwananchi wa kawaida, they will tell you of how much they are able to afford. Yeah. If you look at, for example, the payroll, now we've been subjected into SHA, a bigger deduction. We've been subjected into housing levy, a bigger deduction. You may either, as an employer, you either add money to that particular employee, you end up paying them gross pay that is higher, so that they can still take their net, what I would call take home. Yeah. We normally call it take home. Yeah. So that they can be able to take home apparently what they were taking before. All right. But which means you're taking a bigger haircut.
And I'll be following up on that conversation. Why is it we're not able to match the wages with the rate of inflation, and what would it take? Yes. Cabinet Secretary National Treasury is watching us and has sent us some feedback that I want us to look at. That is John Buddy. He's writing to us and saying that, takes a bit of time. That gentleman needs to understand that the shilling has been steady against hard currencies is also because we have in the last 1 year been able to send the correct signal in liability management, and so not exposing the economy to possible shocks. I believe this is referring to Steve. You continue to say that our currency would only lose ground if there was pressure in terms of dollar demand, which is not the case because we have adequate reserves from current account balances, which has been doing well. Remittances and liability management. Further, there is reduced demand for dollars due to the new policy on importation of petroleum products.
We are a net importer country. The basic aspect of economy is agrarian. There is no investment in agriculture. There is no investment in manufacturing and production. As long as we continue being a net importer, it explains why the CS is actually alluding to specifically doctoring the performance of the shilling versus the dollar. If you look at if you look at a linear graph for the last 5 years, for the last 1 year, the shilling versus the dollar is a straight line. There's no ordinary movement, even by a cent, for example. Yeah, and even if you're looking at what the CS is saying, alluding to proper fiscal management by central bank, increased remittances, the element of
liability management.
Yes, sorry, increased forex reserves, for example, managed inflation rates. Still, it will tell you that how come then, if these key issues, if these key factors are the ones being used to manage the shilling versus the dollar, why can't it apply across to other currencies? And the element is, we go back to what the gentleman said, the element of, the aspect of economy is this: ordinary people are not feeling it. The value of 100 shillings has dropped significantly. 1,000 shillings 5 years ago will have gotten you 5 items in a supermarket. Now it can only get you 1. This is 1,000 shillings.
But let me ask you, Steve, you don't think, because CS is saying that sending the correct signal in liability management, I would imagine that he's talking about repayment of external debt, whether it's the euro bonds you have or other debts. You don't think that has any impact on perception of the country in the international financial markets?
The one thing the government has done very well was to convert the Chinese debt from the dollar to the yuan. That was a good fiscal management strategy, and I give it to them. But we need to understand that as long as, even if we are paying our debts as and when they fall every single time, but we are not creating more jobs, we are borrowing recklessly, we are spending recklessly. There's no financial prudent management in this case, because you can pay your debts on time, but how is the government borrowing the money, for example? We are coming up with very interesting titles, securitization of this and that, to be able to borrow more money. We've actually taken money for the future. I mean, my fuel payments, for example, for the next 2 months, they've already been planned for. You get? Okay. So as long as we borrow recklessly, we spend recklessly, it will not matter how much with prudence we pay our debts. And this is where the big problem is. Okay. We are managing very well one aspect of the economy, but completely ignoring the other bit of it. When you look at the core aspect of the economy of the country, manufacturing, agro-processing, production, tourism, they're not doing very well. And what's doing very well in the economy is basically the service sectors and the real estate construction. But all these two depend on the other three. So as long as we keep on the current trajectory, we are going to really get into a very big trouble up ahead. And it's going to be very difficult for us to be able to meet our debt payments on time, as the CS puts it. All right.
So then, Alex, it looks like, based on what I'm hearing, so the statistics may show us that there is a great effort. Of course, if you have to also listen to the Cabinet Secretary on the many strategies they have deployed to ensure that we are stable as an economy. But at the same time, there's that concern about the expenditure. Is it last weekend we saw the president donating 50 million shillings to a church in Vihiga County, and there has been similar donations, so it's 20 million here, empowerment programs there, the State House Empowerment Program that, if you're to do the estimation, is about 500 million shillings plus. So yet we operate within fiscal budgets. We read one in June this year. But then there are certain programs that are outside that fiscal plan. They are executed by government officers, and partly some of the questions that I think Steve was calling bribing the voters. How do you deal with that?
Thank you, Sam, and it's good to hear that the CS is listening. Before I come to that, I just want to refer the CS to a document he has been involved in producing, the Budget Review and Outlook paper for 2025. He's familiar with this, page 42 actually of the Budget Review and Outlook paper approved by Cabinet recently, shows the exchange rate, how it has been behaving. And you will see the Kenyan shilling against, actually, what they have provided are three hard currencies. That is the US dollar, the sterling pound, and the euro. From January 2024, actually before January 2024, the three currencies have a curve that is almost similar. You can see it is going up all the way to a high in January. But then, after that, it goes down, and beginning around May, the US dollar is flat. But the other two currencies are moving, and that's a Budget Review and Outlook paper, a document produced by Treasury. So when we say when we look at this number, we would need an explanation as to why is it that it's only the US dollar that is flat. We would have seen something that is almost similar. And if you listen to now the explanation that it's a liability management, what basically we are doing is kicking the can down the road. Because what we did in January of 2024, we bought back our Euro bond that was at a lower interest rate, I think 6.8, and we bought back at 10-point-something%. And I think we've also done the same with other Euro bonds, kicking them down the road. But now, looking at it from the other angle, if we have our budget, which is not balanced, our deficit, as the budget was read in June, was supposed to be 923 billion, of which 685 or thereabout was supposed to be borrowed domestically, and 287 was to be borrowed externally. But still, this document, the Budget Review and Outlook paper, gives an indication that even that particular borrowing is going to go slightly higher. And even in the coming period, we're also seeing a situation where our borrowing is going to exceed $1 trillion. So when now you look at all these fiscal numbers and then you look at how we are spending, it doesn't give the Kenyan an indication of a country that is struggling. Yeah. Because we seem to be spending in a manner that portrays a country that is doing well when you look at now the donations and the things that the empowerment programs that we are seeing. But when you come back and you see that we have striking lecturers that have been told we are going to, they need, is it 7.8 or 0.9 billion? They've been told we are going to give you half this time around, then you have to wait for the other half. I think we also saw capitation for schools coming in after schools had closed. It doesn't, when you look at the side that affects the common mwananchi, it doesn't tell you a very good story compared now to what we are hearing. And we've had stories being told by our leaders that we have dealt with the macro. Now we want to go deal with the micro. Yep. From the economics that I have studied, you cannot delink the two. The macro is an aggregate of micro. If people are not doing well, individuals are not doing well, then the macro will not be doing well. So the good figures we are seeing at the macro level should reflect to the common mwananchi. And some people have even said that when the economy is doing well, you will not need to tell us. You don't need to tell us. We are the ones who are going to tell you, things have improved. My colleague here who is in business, they will tell you now our sales are doing okay because people have disposable income that is higher. Right. But right now, when you look at what I call debt-driven economic policies, they are pushing us down and down because our disposable income is reducing by the day.
Debt-driven economic policies. Wow. Now, let me come back to Ikua, because you said that the wages are not growing, but of course the cost of commodities is going up with inflation. Why are businesses or organizations that employ people, why are they not raising the wages?
Well, you know, Sam, wages are commensurate to the income. I mean, every businessman would want to pay as much as they can afford. So when you are actually drawing down a position or a job description of an employee that you want to bring on board, it is out of a demand that exists within the business that you are conducting. If you look at it this way, and you would hear from reports from FKE, you know, the employers trying to complain, when the economy is struggling, it means that the opportunities that existed in terms of incomes are no longer the same. So which means many companies right now and businesses out there, their revenues are actually coming down. And I'm talking about many because we can see some people who are still reporting humongous profits. But those are people sitting pretty in a position of what I would call very good opportunity in terms of monopolizations of what services they are giving. The competition is not the same as what we are, we are experiencing down here. Yep. I'll give, and I'm happy to hear the CS is watching, and I need to really caution him in regard to saying the economy is doing well. Because the purest definition of economy, how it is doing, it is how the common mwananchi, whom they call it mwananchi wa kawaida, because in the reference to everything, this paper, and you can see the budget review papers that they are producing within confinement of boardrooms, does not in any way reflect to what it is that we are feeling on the ground. That is the simplest message that we are telling them. But to come to what the currently, how the government is operating, I've had a very worrying statement here in regards to how the Eurobond, for example, was treated when we say you're kicking it forward. I want to tell the common mwananchi that no matter how much you agitate to look for another government, there is trouble ahead. When all these debts are being pushed forward, when we look at the kind of bonds that they are doing currently, maintaining a separate, what I would call a separate loan book in regards to the common loan book that you can, you can audit and look at. Now we are borrowing in terms of bonds and other things that we are doing. It's still another form of borrowing that does not necessarily knock the door of the IMF. For example, when you use the fuel levy that we've been mentioned here, and you actually securitize that particular fuel levy, you basically committing that particular money to the person who is actually lending you that particular money. And what that means is that if that particular loan is 15 years, for example, even the government that would come, as much as they would want to lower the cost of fuel, they will not be able to touch that particular amount that have already been committed. In other words, you continuing auctioning and committing government revenue streams now, but for the future. In other words, we will have a government that will come into the future that will have absolutely no revenues. And they will be forced to go back to the economy's experts and start telling them, show us how we can be able to make a finance bill that gives us another, or what I would call create another revenue streams. Yeah. I mean, that's a very simple understanding. And I am already can see, I can see danger in future business people, because I can tell you, as much as we are agitating to have relief on many tax brackets that have been put onto us and imposed, now I can see a future where that will not be possible. Actually, we are going to have more taxes in the future. I saw a statement from the president in regards to what it is we require to become. Is it a first world or something like that? Yep. I mean, there was such a comment. And he said we do not need to add, and we do not need to increase our taxes. How are you going to raise that revenue? In a simple business term, if, for example, in my small businesses, I want to open a branch, and I want to open another shop somewhere else, it requires me to have money to be able to buy. I cannot open an empty shop and then sell it from that shop. Whenever a customer comes, I tell them, no, the stock is on the other shop. I have to come and create another investment. I have to raise another capital and put into an extra shop, which means now I need to raise more money. Now, as a government way of operating, for them to be able to raise more money in future, what are they going to do? They must raise taxes. They must create revenue streams. We are building a stadium here that we have actually securitized that particular, we are calling it something fund, I think sports fund, and we can lead this Taranta or whatever, that is actually to a tune of 40 billion with a repayment of 100 billion in its maturity. I mean, who is going to pay the 60 billion? We will continue having people being taxed, in terms of those betting companies and the likes, and we will actually be able to squeeze further development as far as sport is concerned. And the demand of sport will continue rising. We may have Taranta, but you do not know what demand of sport will have in the next 5 years, 10 years. But if you committed all your money for 15 years, 5 years, 10 years ago, what are you going to do when that time comes? You definitely create another levy somewhere else. Okay,
you've taken us to the next conversation, but I just wanted us to tie down on what we were talking about, the situation with the businesses and why they're not able to raise the wages. I don't know if Churchill have perspectives.
Maybe I can
we'll get back to the conversation about the strategies that the government is deploying to raise funding. But Churchill, your thoughts, because in this country there has been one issue with businesses about the pending bills that have not been paid for a very long time. But also, if inflation pushes us to buy goods at a higher rate, there's the question of taxes, new taxes that are being introduced and we have to pay. But businesses are struggling to raise wages for their employees. Is there a way of dealing with that? Are we struggling with the state of economy or cash flow challenges, or both?
Seems like it's both. Looking at the wage system within the Kenya, and this is also for the public employees and also the private employees. For the public employees, we have the SRCs, Salaries and Review Commission, which sorts of regulates their wages. Now for the private sector, and also we have collective bargaining agreements. We've seen even the nurses, the teachers, so that falls within, because we are within the ambit of the trade unions. So they're the ones who are they are now clamoring for their wages. But we've seen even in terms of the wage bill, if you look at the wage bill, if my numbers should be correct, should be around 600 billion of that's the wage bill to the public sector. So if at all, and that's where the challenge comes in, how can we see that some of these wages could be reduced lower, because already they are quite high. Yep. But we see even this wage bill also includes some of these allowances, which at some point there was a task force on that, which suggested that we need to reduce some of the allowances to the public sector. So if you look at the private sector, as Ikua had alluded to earlier, I mean, if for the wages, if we need to see an increase in the wages, at least to the private sector, those businesses need to be profitable, but that's still not the case. We've seen that some of the businesses are quite struggling. Anecdotal evidence, if you look at even the pages in the newspaper, auctions are quite there. So just shows some struggling business. So that's on the private sector. They rely heavily on the profits, and also we have some of the gig economy, so their contracts.
Yeah.
So this pretty much looks at some of the wage issues in the country, but on the public sector, there's some constraint on that.
Yeah.
Private sector, they're still struggling. So the way around that, and I think it fits in how the government policies needs to be able to ensure that there's more disposable income to the pockets of Mwananchi. We've seen the last couple of years the disposable income has reduced, looking at the statutory reductions that have been introduced the last 2.5 years. So that has been quite a major pain point to the disposable income, and now ties even to the discussions that we're talking about, that prices of goods have been increasing, but yet the monies to be able to at least ensure that the households are able to meet some of this expenditure is quite shrinking here. So, and even the data from the economic survey, the real wages, in real terms, the wages have somewhat been stagnant, because you're comparing the wages, or if there's no wage increase, in this case, to the private sector, and you're comparing to the levels in 2016, because if you look at it in real terms, you're looking at a static number, that is the year 2016. So it's like, it's still as it is in nominal terms. So if you're earning, say, you're at 10,000, the last 5 years, it hasn't increased. But if you compare with 2016 numbers, so that's where it's showing that it's static, or it's been declining in some cases. So that's the conundrum that the business or households are finding themselves in.
And actually, on the question of the wage bill, it's more than that. It's more than 1 trillion shillings to the public sector. Knowing too well, it's been on the rise. The SRC has been on a mission to lower the wage bill to, is it GDP? No, to revenue ratio to
35%.
35%. Currently doing, is it about 48%? Yeah. Now, just a moment. There's something you raised about disposable income, and I'm just wondering, because the government still needs more money, is it even possible to, because if you have to increase the disposable income, it's either you cut the taxes or you raise the real amount itself. So how do we deal with that? The SRC keeps saying that they want to raise productivity in the public sector. Is it even possible, so that you have higher productivity and perhaps more incomes?
I think it will be challenging in terms of how can they also introduce new taxes. But if you look at it, Finance Bill 2025, and based on the events that happened last year, to us is that they were rolling back the aggressiveness that were there based on the protest, and even the read of Finance Bill 2025, there wasn't that aggressiveness. So probably that will be the strategy going forward, that they might tone down some of these things. But also remember that we have medium-term revenue strategy to implement, which give some of the guidance in terms of how the proposals will look like. And one of the things that was proposed that should have been implemented in the last financial year was also the lowering in the value-added tax, right now at 16%. So the strategy was now to reduce it gradually. So we thought that that was the opportune time for it to be introduced. If it had been introduced at that point, we couldn't have seen people going to the streets. But that's that boat has already sailed. Yeah. So who knows whether in the next iterations of finance bills we could see that being lowered. There's also the suggestion of reducing the corporate tax from 30% right now, even to 25%, and also that upper pay as you earn from right now 35% also to be to be where the corporate income tax is. So this is within the context of the medium-term revenue strategy. Okay. The implementation is quite, it's where the issues are, because we've been hearing, oh, probably there could be some income being foregone. We have the tax expenditure reports that typically shows what are the foregone revenue. So that is kind of the dilemma that the government is in. But I think that it's about time that they could also consider reducing some of these tax rates that they had indicated within the context of the medium-term revenue strategy. It could also increase the disposable income. We could see even some businesses at least reducing the strains within the businesses. Yep. And also the other thing is now to address the pending bills. At least there was communication to that effect. Already there's that verification committee. We haven't seen the report, final report coming out. Yeah. But in the current financial year, those steps of at least from the process of the privatization, they were looking at 149 billion. Securitization already to the road sector, 80 billion in the last financial year. So if addressing of the pending bills is done, at least it could be able to ease up some of the pressures that we're seeing within the real sector.
All right. Steve, I know you have something to say. Please do so that we can quickly cross over to the sovereign wealth fund that is being proposed by the government.
I've constantly said that as long as we keep ignoring the core aspects of the economy, agriculture, production, manufacturing, increasing salaries for people is always going to be a very big problem. For the last 5 years, we've seen the cost of energy go up. The last 5 years, we've seen the cost of transportation go up. We've seen the cost of healthcare go up. We've seen the cost of education go up. So as a business person, I'm unable to increase the pay to my people because every single financial year, I have to factor in more money for electricity, more money for security, more money for healthcare. And it gets worse when the government keeps increasing taxes. So I will increase the cost of this newspaper from 50 to 60, not so that I can add more money to my employees, but so that I can be able to pay for those taxations. And it becomes a very big problem when it's only part of the economy that's actually benefiting. The people who are making money right now are banks, telcos, and government entrepreneurs are sitting pretty because they have sort of a monopoly for the kind of businesses they do. For the rest of us in manufacturing or agriculture, we are really struggling. Even just being able to pay electricity alone is a very big problem. Huge. When you go to Trans Nzoia and Bungoma and part of Busia, large-scale farmers have scaled down significantly because of two issues. Cost of diesel is very high and cost of farm inputs. So it's a hybrid of very, very many problems.
But they subsidize fertilizer.
The truth is, the subsidized fertilizer was not for everyone. It was for select people from select regions. And that particular fertilizer had a problem.
What do you mean, select people from select regions?
I mean, call out any farmer and ask them whether they benefited for anything from the subsidized fertilizer. They didn't get anything. If you talk to farmers in Trans Nzoia, they were not able to benefit much from it because they went and got 2 bags of cement. Someone has 5,000 acres of land. How is 2 bags going to help? Ask a maize farmer in Webuye. They will tell you, I got 1 bag. It was not enough. So I still had to go and buy more. So even when you look at government subsidy programs, there's a lot of corruption within the programs. And there's a lot of questions as to what was the source of this fertilizer. Yeah, if we look at the quality and the content of the fertilizer for this planting season this year, it's been a very big problem. If you look at the farm output, how much bags of maize we've gotten this year, how much tonnage in terms of tomatoes and potatoes, it's reduced significantly because of the poor quality of the farm inputs. But my point is, it's very difficult to pay workers better salaries when taxation is actually unpredictable. You know, if we are into export and import business, Kenya is coming up with new levies and laws every single day. So we do not have a predictable taxing system that can help businesses plan for the next 5 years. Manufacturing grows when you're able to plan in decades or in 5 years. Right. It doesn't grow when you plan every 6 months. So it's a very big problem. Cost of energy is a challenge. Access to credit is a very, very big problem. So you realize that only government suppliers and telcos and banks are making money. The rest of us,
even them are facing challenges with pending bills.
Well, if you're a genuine business person, you supply to the government, that's a very big problem for you. You will not get paid. Because my experience has been, for me to be able to get paid for what I've done for the government, I have to cede 50% of that money to the entire process. And this is the big
50%.
problem. Yes, look at, there's a young gentleman from Machakos called comedian Sami. Look at the engineer in Kisumu. Similar problems. And you, when you really interrogate further, you realize that they had an opportunity to be paid if they were willing to cede part of the payment to the system. So it's a very big problem.
So what do you do? Do you yield or do you stay put?
The gentleman in Machakos yielded, closed his business. The gentleman in Kisumu stayed put and committed suicide. It's a very big problem. So when you look at the pending bills, actually, when you look at national and county pending bills, it's around 600 billion, and it's getting worse. And it's a very big problem. And now, I run a small business where I owe my suppliers 10 million. Government owes me 20 million. I owe my bank 15 million because of access to credit. I've not paid my workers for 6 months because I have no access to money. It's a very, very big problem. So we need to reform the VAT system, for example. We need to change how we do our financial bill from every year to maybe every 5 years, so that we're able to give businesses an opportunity to plan and be able to make profit. How many businesses are making profit? Very few. Actually, most of us are simply surviving. You know, the circulation of capital is just coming in so that I can pay you today and hope to pay you tomorrow, so that I can be able to survive. None of us are making profit. Very few people are making profit. So we need significant reforms in the tax code. We need significant reforms in how to access credit. And we need to pass a law that if a government entity delays paying me beyond the 30 days, then I'm able to take action and be able to get my money back.
Okay, all right. Now, I don't think you'll be doing justice to introduce Sovereign Wealth Fund in the remaining 6 minutes to the end of the show. Ikua, you wanted to say something. I don't know what it's about.
I'm actually very impressed with how Steve have explained the challenges that are currently being faced by our business people out there. The question you had asked me earlier in regards to why we are unable to increase our wages as far as the private sector is concerned has just been answered there in regards to, because I mean, your cost centers, especially fixed costs, keeps on increasing every day, and there's nothing you can do about it. But it is also important to note that, especially now that we know most of the government people are watching this, that the government is the biggest spender in any economy. In any case, they are the origin of most of the monies that you need to go and spend. So the opportunities that exist there in terms of the government tenders and all that, depending on what kind of policies you have, especially on how you pay your local business people. When you hear a statement like the government owes local businesses, remember I saw the response from the CS is actually he's taking pride in terms of how much they managed the foreign debt. Yeah. But I would want to hear his statements in regards to what they are doing to actually pay all verifiable pending bills. You know, in a simple term, Sam, when I am not paid for 6 months, even if you pay me after those 6 months, the value for that money due to the inflation that we've been told by the economists here, it is different. What it is that I could be able to do, imagine a situation where many businesses out there have overdrafts. They have taken overdrafts from the banks, and that's why you can see banks are reporting huge profits every day. I mean, those overdrafts incur cost for on us every day. And that money you took overdraft for, it's still lying on government. In fact, I remember the 2024 pending bill had a clause there that was similarly nice in terms of at what point does your tax falls due. For example, if I supply government, they will force me to invoice some. Invoicing meaning that I go to e-Teams and I produce an invoice. At that particular point in time, I've already reported an income. I've already announced myself as somebody who is expecting to receive an income of a particular amount. Remember that particular service is vatable. That particular tax there is payable within the next, at the 20th of the preceding month. Yes. If I do not do...
Following month.
Yeah, the following month. Yeah. So if I don't pay that money, it immediately starts accruing penalties in the KRI current setup system. Now I want to ask you, if you pay me in 3 years, in 4 years, most people are committing suicide because of these frustrations. If you open this newspaper, how many pages have they sold in terms of the properties being auctioned? Why is it not a bother that we have so many people being auctioned every day? And if you go and ask those particular people, because most of them are people you know by name. and we know why it is that they are being auctioned.
So, because there's already a problem there. So
yes.
Is it income when it's invoiced or income when it's received? And what is the path to reforming that to reflect the reality?
Are you aware that you're going to be harassed by the KRA because you've not remitted your tax dues? And that tax due you're talking about is money you've not received from the same government that is coming to knock your door. How realistic is that? What kind of a policy is that? I mean, all I'm saying is that business people are struggling every day. And when there is no payment, for example, the circulation within the economy is less. The shop that I have down there, the number of customers are definitely going to reduce. If I was doing a head count of 50, right now we are doing head counts of 20 and even 10. So from 50 to 10 and 20, which means even the spending power in terms of disposable income that we've been told here of the customer who have come, a customer who used to come to my shop and spend 50,000 is now coming to my shop to spend 10,000. They are all over looking into the price tags of those particular items that I'm selling out there to try and see what it is that they can afford. Okay. There is a genuine concern in regards to the amount of money our government keeps on holding that belongs to the common mwananchi. And the simplest of them all is to just make sure that as much as you prioritize to make sure we remain safe by paying foreign debt, you should put double aggression in terms of how much you're paying your domestic debts. And domestic debts include the surprise. Because the government of Kenya is very good in paying for their bonds. If you take infrastructure bonds and all those other facilities that they give as loans, they are going to pay you. You are not going to have problems being paid those amounts. You have not had anybody go to the street to say they have not been paid of a bond they bought from the government. But wait, woe unto you if you supply government anything.
Okay. Now, Alex, I'm so sorry that we can get into the Sovereign Wealth Fund.
We can touch about it. It's a very interesting concept.
No, we can't. It's just 1 minute, which I want to dedicate to Alex as his final remarks.
Yeah, thank you, Sam, and we look forward to discussing the Sovereign Wealth Fund the next time. What you have heard is the story of our country. And I'm looking at the fiscal projections that we have for the future in the budget that we are now to paper, and it doesn't look good. When you look at domestic borrowing has led to a shrinking of our economy by a percentage point from 2023 to 2024, and now we are seeing an increase in that in this year. So we are not seeing a very good outlook going forward. And I like what he said, those who are borrowing domestically, at times you will see they are paid, they are not complaining. On 25th of this month, we are going to release a report that shows you how some of these things happen and how our economy has been held by some individuals who have no interest in seeing some of these policies change. And that is why most of us are suffering. And we hope that going forward, that report is going to inform the future policies that we are going to come up with. So the review and outlook paper, what I'm seeing here, if we proceed with this, we are likely to see an increase in taxes. And I hope as we proceed with the discussions of the budget policy statement in the coming months, we will also be discussing about the impact of the fiscal projections going forward.
Okay, I'm just looking at the numbers. Corporation tax grew by 9.9% in the year closing June 2025, reaching 301 billion shillings. Pay as you earn grew by 3.3% at 560.94 billion shillings. Of course, you look at that and contrast it with growing employment numbers, because you're told that nearly 900,000 new jobs are created. Of course, majority in the informal sector. Now the formal sector reporting about 3.4 million jobs. Betting taxes had one of the highest growth at 22%, reaching 5.7 billion shillings. Domestic VAT, 4.3% growth, reaching 327 billion shillings. These are reports of the Kenya Revenue Authority, and of course the global figure of reaching 2.57 trillion shillings, a growth of 6.8%. There is a time the growth year on year would be upwards of 10%, 9, 10, 11%. Now, last year, reported 6.8%. Now, I want to look at the feedback that has come to us, and if we have time, we'll mention just a little bit as a way of introduction to the Sovereign Wealth Fund, because there's a bill, a draft bill that is being introduced. Remy Butia, you're saying the real measure of economic success isn't just in the spreadsheets, but in the affordability of unga, school fees, and transport. Until these two Kenyas converge, the statistics will remain a source of frustration, not hope. Frank Orinde, they say the economy is stable, growth up, inflation down, numbers looking fine, but out here, people can barely afford basics. Jobs are drying up and hope is thinning out. The stats may impress headlines, but reality bites harder. Engineer Lazaro, you can't claim the economy is doing well when we are becoming a big market for others. The nation is importing almost everything, and our foreign exchange rate has hit its lowest level in the country's history. Okay. Can the panelists explain why the Kenyan shilling remains stable against the US dollar, yet it has weakened against the Indian rupee, the Thai baht, the Chinese yuan, the UAE dirham, and the Tanzanian shilling? Is the Kenyan shilling immune? Okay, very interesting question. I don't know who will take that. Just a moment. K Numero, you're saying that I wish you'd break down the conversation and the jargon for the layman. For the common man, you would like to understand what aspects directly affect our pockets and what the government can do to ensure we have more disposable income and some real relief. Thank you, Kay, for that feedback. Again, Frank Orinde, you said that when the economy is truly doing well, it doesn't need endless explanations or economic jargons. People feel it in their pockets, in their homes, in their daily lives. Right now, the numbers may shine, but the reality on the ground tells another story. Yeah, there's that viewer who tells us that we need to break down matters. I apologize if we haven't, but speaking to the real aspects of how businesses are affected, how Kenyans are having to deal with the cost of basic commodities is an attempt, but we'll do more in the coming days and shows. Steve, you want to respond to the Kenyan currency against other currencies?
I think the truth is we are a net importer. The political class, the way they've been able to set up the system is that most of the elected leaders participate in the import business. A country like Kenya, when we import practically everything in the dollar currency. So for me, I believe the stability of the Kenya versus the dollar is principally because of the importation of goods here. We've become a market for other people, as a Kenyan has rightly said so. Yeah. So when we import in things from China, we import things from China, from Japan, from Singapore, from the US in dollars. So that is the only reason why there's been focus on this. And when you look at the players, if you look at the people importing alcohol, for example, or furniture, or clothes, or car parts, all of them are in the political class. So for me, I think there's a singular government policy that this is the dollar we are going to, this is the currency we're going to focus on, and this is how it's going to be, because it's the only way you can be able to explain how it's stable versus the other currencies, the yuan, the rupee, even our neighbors, Uganda and Tanzania. You can tell there's a fluctuation, except that. But it's not fair to have this conversation without looking at the element of unemployment.
Yeah.
Because without money, you cannot afford anything. Without money, you cannot be able to do anything. And that is where we need to have the conversation. What is the state of unemployment in the country?
Now, if the economic survey doesn't tell us the level of unemployment in the country, I don't know who will tell us, because the report, the economic survey 2025, covering the year 2024, reports the following. The world unemployment rate has been almost stable. It's now 5.2% as of 2024. It was 5.1 in 2023. It was 6.9% in 2020. That's it. World unemployment level.
There's a reason why the
it doesn't say anything about Kenya.
There's a reason why the numbers are not being spoken of, and the numbers are not good. So I look forward to more conversations with this gentleman, because I think it's a fairer.
No. I have a few minutes to introduce the Sovereign Wealth Fund. What is it, Churchill?
So we have a proposed piece of legislation, draft Kenya Sovereign Wealth Fund Bill 2025. There was another similar bill that was introduced like 6 years ago, a 2019 bill. But the gist of it is now to ensure that some of this proceeds revenue that are coming from the upstream sectors, this is either mining, this is petroleum. You know, we have some petroleum up there in Lodwar thereabouts, and the revenue and the royalties from those sectors now to be put into this particular Kenya Sovereign Wealth Fund. Ideally, most of the sovereign wealth funds, they have monies, either the oil revenue, if you think about the sovereign wealth funds in the Middle Eastern countries, the revenue from the oil, now they pack it into that particular fund. So that's pretty much the model that you are seeing. But in this case, we have like 3 different buckets. We have one which you call the stabilization component. We have another one which is now the infrastructure investment component, and then we have another one which is Uridi, which is now for generational wealth kind of component here. So those are the 3 buckets that you are seeing. But I'm still struggling with the aspect of the revenue that is now getting into the Kenya Sovereign Wealth Fund. Part of it is now the proceeds from privatization. If you look at the rhetoric we've had, the narrative we've had, there's a bit of some element of altruism that has been packaged when you look at privatization. That the process of privatization for this, in this current financial year, 149 billion, we get it, and then we be able to sort out the pending bills, the discussions that we've been having so far. But yet we are seeing in this particular proposed bill that also the privatization that is coming from petroleum and mining in the event that the government privatizes the entities within these sectors, the process will be put there. And that's where I'm seeing probably there could be some clash, because if you look at the Privatization Act 2025, which was passed like 3 weeks ago, it speaks to the element that proceeds from privatization will be deposited in the consolidated fund. But yet we are seeing a different fund that is being put in place, this Kenya Sovereign Wealth Fund, and yet there's another element around privatization from upstream petroleum sector being being a revenue stream towards this. So I'm saying that there's some confusion over there, but also this is also tied to what you've been hearing from the government. This talks about infrastructure funds. So the strategic investment component of the SWF Sovereign Wealth Fund, it seems to me like now this is where what you've been hearing, infrastructure fund, will be, that's how they might realize this infrastructure fund as a sub-asset of the Sovereign Wealth Fund.
Alex, your understanding of the Sovereign Wealth Fund?
Thank you. The Sovereign Wealth Fund is essentially, the logic behind it is to ensure that the resources that are mined or the money that comes from mining and petroleum business are shared between the current generations and the future generations. That is the whole genesis. But now when we look at the 3 components that Churchill has raised, then we are also hearing that we are going to come up with an infrastructure fund, and one of the components here seems like an infrastructure fund. We are wondering how these 2 are going to work together. And also we are also seeing, I think from what I listened to the CS yesterday, and he was explaining that the National Infrastructure Fund will be financed from proceeds from privatization. And we are seeing here as one of the proceeds, one of the sources of this Sovereign Wealth Fund is a divestment from earnings government will have in mining and petroleum. So there is a conflict, as we explained last time. We have laws coming in and they are hitting against each other. And even the way this fund is being created in this bill, and I know it has come out for public participation or for comments, it is not proper, because Section 6 of the PFM Act, as read together with Section 24, provides that PFM Act is a superior law when it comes to public funds. So therefore, what we should be seeing is just a mention of a creation of a fund under Section 24 of the Public Finance Management Act, and then everything else that we are seeing will be provided for in regulations that will be created under Section 24. But in this particular act, we're even seeing how the money is going to move from the holding account to the stabilization and so on. So there are a number of sections, in my view, that should not be in this bill, but should be...
Perhaps it's from the lessons of the housing levy, where the legal framework was not existent, and they had to go back and come up with a law. But, Steve, in a minute or less, your understanding of the Sovereign Wealth Fund?
I think first and foremost, it's a good idea. It's long overdue. but unfortunately not with this current government. I believe that before we can talk about the sovereign fund, we need to first audit our debt, and principally since 2013. We need to audit our odious debt first and foremost. We need to ensure that we have the correct numbers of how much we owe people out there, both local and foreign. The reason why I say this government is because the sovereign fund idea is brilliant.
Yep.
We have rare earth minerals at the coast in eastern and western Kenya. And I believe that if we manage our resources very well, we can use the wealth fund to reduce taxation, to reform our tax code, and be able to propel our country to first world status. But we know that this government, this current government, is a government of circus and comedians. They will not be able to handle the element of the sovereign fund properly. Lack of transparency is a very big issue. Lack of honesty is a very big issue. And we've seen already, this is a government that proposes laws and policies that are contradict the Constitution and contradict existing laws in place. It shows you that, yes, someone shared the idea, but the people behind the idea have not really done proper research work to ensure that it will run smoothly. Already, we're talking about it, and already it's contradicting several laws in existence.
Okay.
And lastly, the element of mining in this country is something that we've not discussed as a country. So I believe the sovereign fund should either focus principally on our resources from the mining sector and leave fuel and infrastructure to be able to do something else. It's a good idea.
Okay. All right, Steve, Ikua?
Well, any law you see in this country currently being proposed or being put out there, please, you need to see beyond the law itself. It is actually a tool of someone trying, there is a convenience being hidden, because that's what we have seen in the many that they have actually proposed. But I want to mention, when you talk about the sovereign wealth, first and foremost, you know that Kenya, in terms of utilization of our natural resources, we are very, very, very new in regards to many discoveries that have been done. If you heard what Steve have said, when you're talking about the Mrima Hills and you're talking about all the very variable minerals that we have, we've not yet started utilization or, drawing some benefit from it. Look at Turkana Oil. After the discovery of Gamia 1 and the likes, we've not yet commercialized that particular oil. Other than that, the Aribad oil that was done and was sold to China, just one ship, we've still not have done it. Tallow have left the market. They have sold that particular stake to a local company. As I told you, and I want to be very honest with you on this one. Steve, I've talked about debt audit. That will not happen. Any government that behaves like this one will never audit any debt, including the ones that came because they don't want theirs to be audited as well. We lack goodwill in everything that we do, including from such good bills that we propose. There is a reason why that bill has been set, and it has nothing to do with the country. It's the individuals who seek to benefit themselves from it.
All right. Thank you, Ikua. Now, we haven't done anything. We've just mentioned there's a Sovereign Wealth Fund Bill 2025. Have a look at it. I think it's still a draft. Have a look at it. It's on the Treasury website. Read it. We'll have more discussions on it, on what it means for the country moving into the future and for the management of public affairs. Thank you so much, Churchill Ogutu, Ikua Mbote, Alex Rithi, and Steve Biko Wafula for making time for us to have this conversation. My name is Sam Gituku. See you again soon. Up next is Matter Social with Safina Changoma.